Hi, I'm Jack Zenger. I'm here to welcome you to today's webinar. We've titled Drive for Results and Engage Employees at the Same Time. I'm joined today by my colleague, Joe Folkman, and a couple of other people from the Zenger Folkman organization. Brianne O'Corin, our manager of digital marketing, will be making a special offer to you at the conclusion of today's webinar. And Jill Mancini, one of our regional vice presidents, has taken over the interesting and challenging task of responding to all of your comments that you type into the chat room. So if you've got some tough questions or if you have some special requests, don't hesitate to type them in. Today's topic is a very interesting one. When we've asked the question, what competency is most important for leaders to be successful? And this is a question we've asked the subordinates of managers. The overwhelming favorite has been drives for results. It's followed up by things like being inspiring and motivating and solving problems and being collaborative. But you can see that by some margin of wide margin, the topic of driving for results is really an important one, as seen by the subordinates and the colleagues of leaders and organizations. So let's begin today's webinar by posing a question to you. So the question is, when in a person's career is driving for results more important? One, is it early in their career? Or number two, later in their career? And if you would, please jump in and kind of give us your answer to that question, early or later on. So we'll wait.
Jack, this is the question of, do you start strong or do you finish strong?
Yeah, right.
Right.
Right, that's right. So if you'll kind of weigh in, it looks like a lot of you are. So let's take a look at the results. If we can, let's kind of get a sense of what your perception is. And then I'll turn it to my colleague, Joe Folkman, to give you what our data would say is the answer to this question.
Well, what's interesting, Jack, 71% said early in a career and only 29% said later.
Okay.
So if we look at two competencies, and this particular study, what we did was we looked at those who scored above average in terms of their overall leadership effectiveness, and then we profiled them over time. And here's what we found. If you look at a competency like technical expertise, people who are above average, they come in above average on technical expertise at the 62nd percentile. But notice, over time, you gain experience and knowledge and all this stuff, and that you grow into that and you get better at that over time. But if you look at drive for results, what you see is those who scored above average, those who are better performers, tended to do, they were at the 72nd percentile early on in their career. What a great way to get noticed, right? Yeah. What a great way to make a splash. That people know that you're going to deliver, you're going to come through, you're going to be able to do that. And you notice it does go down, but it doesn't go, way down. It goes down to just about the 66th percentile, which isn't low, but over time, age groups, it does go down.
Yes, and as one more supporting kind of piece of evidence, if you look at the factors that determine who gets chosen for the high potential group in a company, we see that those who are in the bottom quartile in comparison to those who are in the middle range and those in the top quartile, in terms of their effectiveness on the topic of driving for results, you see that the ones who are in the top quartile are much more inclined to be chosen and rated as being, the high potentials for that organization. So that just supports the point that Joe just made.
Well, in another study that we looked at management levels, we found top managers tended to score higher on drive for results than senior leaders or middle managers. And supervisors were kind of in between. But it's interesting in that top management position, if you want to know what competency helps me to get promoted into that position, it's drive for results. And that's one of the things that I think people look for in a top manager is that they will deliver. They'll come through with results. Middle managers are they're just trying to keep everybody happy. They're in between it. So it's a little more murky for them in terms of is drive for results very important. Another thing we looked at is gender. Now, we did a study early on between men and women, and we discovered that women were overall better leaders than men. And a lot of people said, well, yes, women are more nurturing, but drive for results is not a nurturing competency. And you see here the results when we compared, this is results for 49,000 males compared to 25,000 females, which that's what we have in our database. But you can see the difference is statistically significant that women score higher on drive for results than men. And when we look at this and do a random sample of 50% of the population, we again get a significant difference there, which is a scientific study or a way to determine, gee, that's really true, that women tend to be better at delivering results than men. And if you look at, again, this by age, you see that as people age, their ratings on drive for results go down. Now, Jack, I have a theory here. Because I know this fellow who's 90, and he's at the 90th percentile on drive for results. So I think it goes down, but it dips back up. What do you?
There are exceptions to this.
There are exceptions to that rule. So, this is the average, and certainly people beat that average.
Okay, one of the questions that comes up on this topic is, what's the impact of this characteristic of driving for results on your subordinates? And so we'd ask you kind of to weigh in on this question. Do the subordinates have kind of lower engagement and satisfaction scores? Or do they have higher engagement and satisfaction scores? You could kind of argue that, people should appreciate not being pushed and having a little more of a happy kind of focus on satisfaction kind of climate. Or do they really enjoy being on a winning team? And is that more important? So weigh in if you would on that question.
This result will be interesting, Jack, because a lot of people have had a boss that really pushed them and they didn't like it. But others have had, this kind of boss that, didn't deliver, and then they kind of were they weren't successful in the company. Yeah. So I'll be interested to see how this one comes out.
Yeah. So the results are?
Yeah, higher satisfaction. 68% said that, those who are more driven have higher satisfaction. And guess what? You're right. So here's the data. And this is from 100,000 leaders. And what we're looking at is leadership effectiveness, or not leadership, drive for results effectiveness on the horizontal axis there, from the first to the 9th percentile, the 90th to 100th. So the worst to the best. And then we're looking at employee engagement. And as you can see, it's really clear that for every step that leader improves on drive for results, engagement goes up. And so we decided to dive in a little deeper into this issue and just kind of examine it a little bit more. And then we looked at this, what we call discretionary effort, or the people that are willing to give 100% and go the additional mile. Now, what's interesting about this whole issue of discretionary effort, over the last few weeks, there's been this issue that's been popping up on TikTok and other mediums about something called quietly quitting. And what quietly quitting is, it's not quitting, it's stopping work at 5 o'clock and you're not going to do any more. The resentment that, people feel, and, when people went home, it got blurred between work life and home life. And, when you're working at home, it's like, well, am I at work or am I at home? And so a lot of people, and we, the people are finding this is a big trend, are quietly quitting. They aren't going to do that extra effort, which is the opposite of discretionary effort. So here's what we found and I just researched this last night, Jack. I found that at the first to the 9th percentile, you got only 14% of your employees who are willing to go the extra mile, but you have about 15% of your employees who are in that quietly quitting category, right? But what you see there is, and this is the interesting thing about quietly quitting, it has a lot more to do with the effectiveness of a leader than the attitudes of employees. Now, that being said, what we find is that people at the 90th, 100th percentile on drive for results still have 3% of their people who are thinking that quietly quitting group, right? That they don't want to put in the extra effort. But there's a 3% chance if you're at the 90th that you got quietly quitting employees. You got 69% chance that people are going to give you that discretionary effort and make a big difference. That is a huge, huge positive factor. So I think that people have to make a decision. Is this the employee's fault or is this me and I'm not as good a leader as I need to be? Look for that article that's coming out soon. One of the things we looked at is confidence. And if you're not delivering results, your direct reports have to shake their head and say, I don't know if we're going to hit our goals or not. But if you're good at driving for results, then there's a 6.8% increase that people will have more confidence that the company is going to be successful. One of the things I wondered is if there was a correlation between the level that a leader was trusted and the extent to which they drove hard for results. And so I wanted to be a little more granular here, and I've divided leaders into 20 groups based on their effectiveness at driving for results. And so as you see here, what happens is that the stronger you are on drive for results, the more trusted you are. Now, some of you have had leaders that pushed and they lost your trust. But what happens is that when they lost your trust, their perception of your ability to deliver results also went down, right? So the people that are at that, in that top category, in the 100th, they're doing both. They're highly driven, but they're also valuing people, and they're also, they're also making sure that you're trusted. And this last one looks at balancing results with a concern for the needs of others. And again, what we're seeing here is, can you drive too hard? Well, what we found in our data is that you can be on the very edge of that. You can really be high on it. Again, if you balance and doing both at the same time, you get that high score, and that's what gives people that high score. So it doesn't look like there's a downside if leaders are driven and they drive hard for results.
So let's just kind of summarize what we've talked about. We've, I think, hopefully made the point that this is a very important topic, that the best leaders seem to be perceived by their direct reports as being driven for results. The question is, can you drive too hard, and can you thereby lose the dedication and motivation of the people for you? And it appears that it's very often that leaders, if they will just balance a concern for the people with this concern for results, that they can be at the very high percentile on driving for results and still maintain all of the motivation and engagement from their subordinates that you would hope to have. And so this quiet quitting is a topic that we will address more as time goes on, but it doesn't need to happen because of the leader's behavior. And let's talk about that leader's behavior. So what is it that leaders do that help them to deliver these high quality results? And we found from our research several factors. And the first one is that they possess really good interpersonal skills. They treat their colleagues with great respect. They initiate activities and projects and kind of willingly take on challenges. So that's the second really important behavior that they display. And the third one is that they do things that build trust with their colleagues. They seek their opinions. They invite them in. They involve more people. They pose important questions to their colleagues, wanting sincerely to know the answers. And they listen to those answers and they act on the feedback that they receive. So these are some of the behaviors that we've found really do bring about these higher results. They seek a direct report's opinion before they express their own. We've all been in rooms where the manager or the boss kind of begins the discussion by stating his or her own position, and then nobody else really wants to certainly take issue with that or disagree with it. So the conversation really isn't all that productive. And it's all because the manager kind of went first. The most effective leaders, the ones who are successful at driving for results, are really cautious about expressing their opinion first. Our research also showed that these leaders who are good at driving for results are more prone to express their appreciation to people. And they are good at providing coaching not only on day-to-day performance, but they frequently have conversations having to do with people's careers and their future. And finally, we found an interesting phenomenon of the fact that these people are quick to act. They step into problems. They don't hold back. And so a few years ago, Joe and I published a book called Speed. And we found that speedy leaders are just simply rated much higher on their ability to drive for results. And you see here the bottom 10% compared to the top 10%, that in terms of how they are perceived on driving for results, those who are in the bottom 10% have a very low score on driving for results, and 10% of leadership speed. Those who were the speediest, those who really took action quickly, were at the 94th percentile when it came to how they were seen on their ability to drive successfully for results. Therefore, one more question for you. Are leaders who are driven to deliver results more likely to kind of get there by really pushing on the boundaries, sometimes even bending the rules a little bit in order to achieve those results? Or on the other hand, are they more inclined to really cut very square corners, to be very careful about honoring commitments and keeping promises? So just weigh in if you would. Does a drive for results incline you to kind of bend the rules? Or do you follow the rules more carefully and keep your commitments? So let's see what kind of results we get here on this one, Joe.
Yeah, we've certainly seen in the news some leaders who bent the rules, but actually 70% say that they honor commitments and keep promises, and only 30% said there was some rule bending going on. So let's look at the data there, because I think this is important. If we look at the connection between driving for results and careful to honor commitments and keep promises, you can see that there's a very strong connection between those two behaviors. And I was always surprised at this, how, I mean, when you look at the correlation between drive for results and other competencies, this one correlates really highly. And you know, I think part of it is again, are there leaders that bend the rules? Yes. What happens? Well, they get caught, or, you know, by bending the rules, it eventually leads to the failure, and they don't deliver the, you know, when you look over, you know, it's a short-term thing.
Short-term, long-term.
They have a success that, or they meet a quarter's earnings or something like that. But over the long term, they're not successful. It doesn't help them. And so it's really the leaders that continue to kind of honor commitments, keep promises. They are the ones that are perceived as really getting results. So let's talk about your preference. Now, our self-assessment, the first part of it really got at your preference. Are you more relationship oriented, or are you more results oriented? Now, this is a tough choice. I get it. I really, really get it. It's a tough choice. And even though this webinar is all about drive for results, this particular self-assessment is tough to get a high score. And so on your feedback report, what we show you is a score that ranges from -10 to +10. The negative scores indicate you're more relationship oriented. Now, I think most people, a lot of people want to be relationship oriented. I mean, that's a good thing. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But some people are more driven. And as you look at that, you can see your score. This particular score is an 8. That's a very high score on drive for results. If you're at the -8 or a +8, you are really on that end there. Let me show you what happens. If we look at, and here's what we did. We took self-assessment data and then we combined it with ratings on 360 data. So this is how I rate myself on this particular assessment, and here's how other people see me. And if you look at those who were on the end of, you know, they were drive for results kinds of, if we look at drive for results, and then if we look at relationship oriented versus results oriented, you can see that the people who were results oriented scored higher than the people that were relationship oriented on drive for results. But on relationship building, the people that were relationship building, you know, relationship oriented, they scored higher on relationships. The results oriented people scored slightly lower. Now notice that both of these are above the norm, but there was a difference. So we do think there's some validity in this. We do think that people that score high or low on this tend to kind of, you know, when people rate their behavior, it'll be consistent with their scores here.
So let me see if I get this correctly. So for all of us, and that is what you just showed is that the self scores are very much confirmed by the 360-degree feedback scores. That if the people are actually pretty accurate in assessing whether they're driven for results more or whether they're driven by relationships more.
It shows up in terms of how you interact with people.
Yeah.
And it's not devastating, you know, the negative effects of that, but it does show up. So here's what I'd like you to do. What I determined as relationship oriented was -10 to -2. And what I determined as mixed, okay, sort of I can't tell, is a -1, 0, or 1, +1. And then the drive for results oriented would be 2 to 10. So on your self-assessment, let's see how this group does. And I have a prediction, Jack. My prediction is that this group is going to be much more relationship oriented than drive for results oriented. So let's see how it comes out. All right, here's the results are about there. Let's see what they come out. All right, 43% relationship oriented. Man, Do I know my data? 35% mixed, which means kind of a little bit of both, some of, and only 22%. Let me just tell you, in our global norms, this is when 3,000 people, 42%, and you were 43%. So you guys are right on the norms. 42% were relationship oriented, 35%, that's a match, exact match, were mixed. And for results, 24%, that's a couple percent higher in our global data. So this is a hard one, but it does give you your, kind of which side of that do you tend to be on? And as you think about, I know sometimes in HR and training, there is a kind of a bias, if you will, that people tend to be better at relationships, but they get criticized around, do you deliver? Do you deliver? Do you come through on the results? And so really this webinar is about, well, how do I do that a little bit better? And what can I do to be a little more deliberate about getting results? So Jack, you're going to give us the secret here.
Yeah, so our assumption is that a lot of you who have attended today's webinar are interested in, so what can leaders do to achieve greater results? And, our knee-jerk reaction sometimes is to think about, well, we expect our people who report to us to work harder and longer. We kind of shrink the time deadlines to accomplish the tasks more readily. We show our frustration when things aren't happening as at the pace we want. Or, sometimes we bend the rules. We delay months in closings. The reality is none of those is true. That is not how people achieve results. What we did find by looking at our data, and we have over 1 million raters in our database, we looked at those other behaviors, those other capabilities that leaders display, which were statistically significantly correlated with people who got really high scores on driving for results. So think of cross-training in the world of athletics. Think of what is it that people do that would really enhance their ability to be a better tennis player, a better runner, or a better golfer, or whatever. So what are the behaviors in the leadership arena which really help someone be much more effective at driving for results? And these 6 topics that you see on the screen are those items that we found to have the highest correlation with driving for results. So we'll begin with takes initiative. People who introduce streamlined procedures, who are seeking the kind of new technology that will help things be more efficient. Those leaders who are willing to try new experiments, rapid prototyping, finding quick answers, getting more people involved. This whole tendency to just put your foot on the gas, take initiative, start things, that was the #1 strength building activity.
Yeah, you always think about those people that are just sort of waiting, right?
They don't wait.
They're in the queue, they're in the line, I'm waiting. And there's those people that they're not going to wait. They're going to do something to get ahead. The next one is act quickly. And Jack mentioned this book that we wrote called Speed. I have a copy of it here. If this is a companion behavior that you're thinking about, get that book, because speed, I have some speed bumps that are on the block I live on, and there's 2 ways of going over them: really slow or really fast. Now, I wouldn't advise the really fast because you get speeding tickets, but it's interesting what happens because when you slow down, everything stops. And so you think about all these slowdowns, like decision making and processes and needing input from everybody and the approvals. There is so many ways, and what we found is leaders that can master this speed really do change the results And that correlation between, Jack showed you, the correlation between speed a leader works at and results is just automatically, that it is so strong.
The third strength builder we found was building trust. That the leaders who were able to get the best results engaged their team in planning a project. They ensure that everyone on the team understands the importance of that project and their role. They work very much on the relationships between people on the team. They're inclined to involve people and get everyone's expertise kind of into the pool. And, you know, they tend to frequently review the progress so that everyone on the team feels confidence that the organization is going to achieve this objective. So this ability to build trust with your team members was the next strength builder.
And the next one is about establishing stretch goals. I think teams in an organization, what they aim for is the state of homeostasis. You know, homeostasis is when the body is functioning and all the parts are working together and you're healthy and you're well, and there's nothing out of whack. And in a lot of ways, stretch goals are the opposite of that. They bring in a possibility. I worked with this team once, and they said, we hate when our boss goes to a meeting. I said, why? It's because he always comes back with this big stretch goal. We're going to do this, and we hate it. But what's interesting about it is when you ask people, would you like to do something difficult or really hard? Everybody says no. But if you ask people, think about a time in your career when you really made a difference, when you had an impact at work, something you're proud of, something where your engagement was really high. And what they'll talk about is this time when they were stretched to do something that was really difficult and it really pushed them. And you know what? Their engagement was higher than ever. Their self-satisfaction was higher than ever. Their confidence that they were important went up. One of the ways that you can really build a team is by doing something very difficult with that team, doing something hard, asking them to really give you their maximum effort. And when you do that, and again, you know, Jack's got these ideas on the slide here of ways to do that, it really makes a difference. So be willing to stretch. What's the next one, Jack?
The next one is a fascinating one. The next thing we found in our research was that the most effective leaders at driving for results were those who anticipated problems that may arise. What the research has shown is that some leaders have this propensity to say, let's take a moment or two as a team to deliberately discuss what's most likely to go wrong on this project? And what is the most serious problem that we might encounter? And they take the time to kind of deliberately elicit what those would be, and then kind of to say, you know, what can we do now that would head these off? And it's fascinating. People are actually pretty good at being able to predict what might go wrong if they'll just take the time to do it. Now, those of us who have raised teenagers, know that they're not inclined to take the time to think about now what might result in a terrible accident, what might possibly go wrong with this thing I'm about to do. So it's maturity that brings this willingness to stop and say, let's think about what could possibly be the biggest speed bump we'll hit, and how do we avoid it?
And I think that's the easiest thing to do out of all the things we talk about. Yep. And this last one is develop strategic perspective. Maybe most of us have climbed a mountain at some point, and we see that mountain in the distance as we're driving towards it, and we admire it. But then as we get to the base of the mountain, we look up and we see what looks like the top of the mountain. And so you go, okay, I can do this. And so you climb up and you climb up and you hit this point that looked like the top of the mountain, and it ends up being a ridge. And it's funny, when you're climbing a mountain, you get to that ridge and you're like, oh my gosh, that wasn't the top. It looked like the top, but it wasn't the top. What's interesting is that if you don't have a clear strategy about going to the top of the mountain, if you're not clear about where you're going, you'll stop when you get to that first ridge because it looked like the top, right? And a lot of groups do that. Imagine a team that's really driven for results, but they're not doing something that really helps the organization. They're trying to accomplish really difficult things or accomplish a goal, but it's not the right goal. They're driving for the wrong things. Now, the combination of clear strategy and drive for results, they have to link together. These two things support each other. And you've got to be clear about where you're going in order to really be successful at delivering results. So again, the way you do that is by doing the things on the list here, challenging the things, making changes, deciding what's a priority, blocking challenges, and developing a culture. Does the culture suggest this? And anyway, those are things to have a clear strategy. So what we did in your self-assessment is we had you assess your effectiveness on these 6 strength builders. And you're going to have some variation in your scores, but this gives you an idea about your level of effectiveness on these different things. Now, you might have been generous to yourself and give yourself all 5s, and that's not very helpful. So if you did that, imagine what other people would say, which ones they would give you the high scores on. But these all work. They all work. But and then on your self-assessment, we also had you measure your effectiveness at driving for results. And we've provided the normative comparisons so you can compare yourself to the norms on both your relationships, results, kind of first thing that we did on the preferences, and then on the effectiveness on the 6 characteristics and drive for results. So you can see where you are and get a good sense about where you are. Let me show you how this relates to what we're talking about here. If we look and we found, and again, we analyzed data from over 100,000 leaders to determine this. If you have a fatal flaw in any one of those 6 strength builders, your ability to deliver results is at the 30th percentile. You're in trouble. So we'd strongly suggest if you're bad at any one of those, you ought to do some work to improve it. Now, if you don't have a fatal flaw, you could say, well, I'm just going to try to improve every one of these. So if you improved one and was above average on one, your effectiveness would go to the 34th percentile. On 2, it'd go to the 43rd percentile. On 3, it would go to the 51st percentile. Now, that's this approach of the way to get better is to improve on everything. I've got to be good at everything. We think that's not the best approach. Because look what happens if you just take one of those 6 and improve it to the 75th percentile. You actually get to the 54th percentile on drive for results. But if you go to the next step and say, I'm going to be really good at one, I'm going to have a profound strength in one of these at the 90th percentile. Your drive for results ability goes to the 70th percentile, 2 takes you to the 79th, and 3 takes to the 85th. Our bias here is the way to really get better of this if you don't have a fatal flaw, is to find one of these and become really, really good at it. That gets you to the 70th percentile. If you're already really good at one, get 2, and it gives you the 79th percentile in drive for results. That is the strength building approach. So Jack, how do people do that?
You bet. So let's just kind of summarize and say, as you look at your scores, first, do you have what we would call a fatal flaw in any one of those strength building behaviors? Did you have a really, really low score? And as Joe mentioned to you earlier, probably it would be wise to see if you can shore that one up. So whether it's anticipating problems or any of those six, by all means, kind of look at what might be done to overcome that. But for most of you, you won't have that. So which of those six strength builders, in your opinion, would have the most significant impact on your performance in your current job? So taking initiative, acting quickly, building trust, establishing stretch goals, which of those six would have the greatest impact in your current job? And as you think about which of those you might want to focus on for the next few weeks, the other question is, are you reasonably passionate about wanting to improve that behavior? Would you really enjoy getting better at your strategic thinking skills or your ability to kind of build trust among your colleagues? So we would invite you to kind of think about that. So the objective is that you would choose one of those strength builders for your development. And Joe and I are always very curious about just of those six, which of those have you kind of leaned toward maybe wanting to work on in the next few weeks? So if you wouldn't mind just sharing with us which of those, we would find that very interesting. Which of those six seems like it might have the biggest impact on your performance in your current job? So which of those? And we would.
What do you think, Jack?
We don't get to vote.
Which is going to be number one?
I think taking initiative will be number one.
Oh, I'm going for acting quickly. We really pitched that hard.
And maybe you told people that anticipating problems was the easiest one. So
that's true. That's true.
So can we display the results? So let's see here.
All right. Well, it's a horse race. I think
nothing really.
Strategic perspective is number one. Trust is number two. I know a good book on that. And acting quickly is number three.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And anticipate problems is number 8. Well,
So it's a nice blend, nice blend of all those. And so thank you for sharing your decision with us. So when you complete the exit survey, you are going to receive one of our development guides that will give you some practical suggestions for developing each one of these strength builders. So we hope that you'll find there some ways that will help you kind of get better at the one that you chose. And we hope that you have great success in improving on that dimension. So I'll conclude by just sharing a quotation from Dennis Waitley, who's a very popular author on leadership subjects. And you can see his comment there that success is almost totally dependent upon drive and persistence. The extra energy required to make another effort or try another approach is the secret of winning. So I'm going to turn now to Brianne O'Coran, who's going to share with you kind of a special offer that we have. So Brianne, it's all yours.
Thank you, Jack and Joe. That was such an amazing presentation about these 6 different strength builders and what a great way it is to develop this particular skill that's based on research. We've heard from a lot of organizations that the skill of driving for results, this drive has been missing. We've had a few years that have been hard. People are tired. They've been stretched thin. They've been forced to change in ways that were hard. And what's interesting about this skill is that the way that leaders drove for results in the past is not the way that we need to do it in the future and the way that we need to do it now. We can build more productive and positive and safer workplaces that people want to be part of, and they want to give their extra effort to, because they want to contribute to its success. And it's dependent upon the leader, like Joe talked about in that research earlier. So for you, we have a special offer for leaders in your organization who need to understand how to utilize this skill. You can host a Drive for Results leadership development experience with Joe Folkman himself. An exclusive discount of $5,000 for up to 25 participants. The standard fee is $7,500. And because this is such an important skill for all levels of leaders throughout your organization, we're actually going to offer up to 2 sessions from our catalog at $4,500. So you could host 2 Drive for Results sessions, or you can go onto our website to our micro learning sessions and do Drive for Results and Resilience, or speed, since it is one of the skills that is linked to this. So we encourage you to go on there and look at that. It must be scheduled by September 30th, 2022, and the offer is available for qualified US-based organizations. And you can let us know of your interest for that in our exit survey. And be sure to take that exit survey. You can get the link on the next slide, or we'll have it at the comments in our chat box, so that you can get the development guide, so you can know different ways that you can drive for results. So like I said, the exit survey will launch as we conclude this webinar. Thank you for attending today. If you have any feedback, we'd love to hear it. And we look forward to seeing you next time.